All right, awesome. So hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Samantha. I am a youth services manager here with the Dauphin County Library System. We are really excited to have you here, to have Floyd and Danielle with us. Um, so I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to, put yourselves out there and have these conversations. I just think it's really fantastic that we could put this together. So let's see, I want to start off with a little bit of housekeeping, and then I will introduce our wonderful guests and we'll get started. So tonight is really about open discussion and respectful dialogue. We'll hear from our speakers first, and then the audience will have a chance to ask questions, offer experiences, or comment on the topics we discuss. Um, of course, it's so important that we all remain respectful and kind to one another. If you would like to share, try to speak from your own experiences using I statements versus they or we or you. And feel free to type questions into the chat that Floyd and Danielle can answer at the end. Okay, so enough of that. So first off tonight, we have Danielle Bowers. She is a member of the Harrisburg City Council. We discovered her through her piece in the July edition of The Berg, titled Voices of Our Community. It's super good. I highly recommend it. You can find it on the Berg website. And then we also have Floyd Stokes here. He is a local children's author, a member of the DCLS Board of Trustees, and the founder and executive director of the American Literacy Corporation. So is there anything either of you would like to say before we get started?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. Okay, we got a few more.
Yeah, I'm just glad to be here and glad to be sharing the panel with Danielle, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely fantastic. Okay. So I have some questions here to help facilitate discussion. But really, if you feel the conversation going off in another direction or something, please just go with it. I want this to be really organic and natural for us. So, like I said, I can help guide the conversation a little bit, or you can just run with it. That's totally up to you. So I'm going to start off. Well, this program got pushed back a couple of times. It was supposed to be in February. So, of course, that's Black History Month. And so, my first question is kind of about what Black History Month means to you, how you feel about it, and just what your thoughts are. Maybe, Floyd, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would. Thank you, Sam. Um, Black History Month means Black History 365. It's always an opportunity to learn our history and share it with the younger generation. And so we use the month to highlight Black history, uh, achievements, accomplishments, struggles, overcome certain things. And you know the month is, again, just an opportunity to highlight the history, but we study history, we share history of 365 days of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Danielle, how about you?
Thank you. I think I really would agree with Mr. Stokes. I think that uh, Black History Month is simply 28 days to highlight our accomplishments, but Black history is present every day of the year. Uh, Two immediate thoughts came to mind when you asked the question. One, this past Black History Month, I highlighted Black history in Harrisburg on my social media pages. And I highlighted literally a little bit of everything, and the impact that Black men and women had in our local community. So if you have an opportunity, please feel free to view some of the postings. I found it to be an educational experience. Of course, some people I was familiar with, others I wasn't. So it was a great opportunity to learn something new about the city in which I live, work, and thrive. The other thing that I'd like to highlight is we mentioned that Black history is relative every day of the year. So probably everything around you in either your home or your workspace, if you are safely commuting back and forth to your former workspaces, um, Black people have impacted. uh, a doorknob, an elevator, a refrigerator, a bed. um, so I think Black people are very resourceful, and extremely creative in the impact we've had in everyday life. So,
I'd like to also add and build on what Danielle said, in that, you know, we typically, the reason why we celebrate Black History 365 and highlight the 28 days on 29 on leap year
mhm.
is because, we're not written in the books, the typical textbooks, the typical history books. And so we use this as an opportunity to highlight the importance of including us in world history, American history, because Black history is American history. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both so much. That it's definitely something that's always stood out to me too. I'm like, 28 days, okay. It's got to be all year. So, actually, with that, I wanted to ask about um, figures from history that have stood out to you. So maybe Danielle, if you have any of those local figures off the top of your head, not to put you on the spot, but I think that sounds so interesting. Um, is there anyone that jumps out that you could tell us about?
Sure, that has impacted me directly. Is that your question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it has had an impact on you, an effect on you, anything like that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I would have to say, while I found every single individual that I highlighted to be interesting and impactful in their own right, I was most proud to share on the final day of Black History Month my family's impact within the Harrisburg community. So, my great grandfather owned a hotel in Harrisburg. It was called the Potter's Hotel. And he, ironically, a lot of the Black performers that came through Harrisburg stayed at this hotel because it was one of only two at the time that they had an option to stay at. So knowing that my family had such a great impact um, within the community in which I reside is just it's such a blessing to me. Um, Another thing about my great grandfather is he and my great great grandfather both worked in the state capitol building as custodial staff. And ironically, my full-time job, I work in the state capitol building for the House of Representatives. So I just think it's very interesting how life brings us full circle. And so out of everyone I highlighted, I was most proud and excited to share my family's history.
That is so cool. I love family history things. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. Floyd, how about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in the deep South in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. So one of the folks that stands out as far as history is concerned would be the founder of my hometown, Isaac T. Montgomery and Benjamin T. Green. They were slaves, and they were freed, and then they founded Mount Bayou, a town, and it was all Black. And in the deep South, there weren't that many of them, but it became a safe haven. So in a lot of respect, we were, I would call, sheltered. We didn't experience a lot of the segregation kind of Jim Crow laws. We didn't have to worry about drinking at different water fountains as whites. We didn't have to worry. The whole town was Black. So we didn't experience but when we went right outside the town, I didn't grow up in the 60s, but my family did. But prior to that, but because of where we grew up, we didn't experience a lot of the discrimination in the town. But again, once we would go outside of that, we would. I think it's just profound what a former slave was able to do and establish the town. And much like Danielle mentioned, my family we were farmers, and what that showed me growing up in that area is everyday people who were teachers, police officers, the next door neighbor, took care of us, helped raise us, helped mold us. It was truly a village. And so, there are a lot of people. So when people tell me, Black people are this, the negative stereotypes and all those kinds of things, I have something different to point out, because I grew up around people who achieved, who were successful in their own way, and who were determined and hard workers and those kinds of things. So you can't tell me what we can't do, because I saw it every single day.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, from both of you. Great responses. I would also like to talk a little bit about children's literature. I am a children's librarian. We have a children's author with us, and representation there. Um, it's a really big topic right now. What was literature like for you as kids? How are you seeing growth? Um, if you're able to offer any sort of insight into that, what your experience was like, that would be great.
You want me to go first? I'll go
Oh,
first.
yeah, sure. Whoever. It's fine.
All right. So growing up, books weren't prevalent in my home. Um, and I tell the story that, like, the aha moment was being in high school, being assigned to read Animal Farm, required reading, and loving it. Right? Like, whoa, this is a really, really good book. And it kind of turned me on to reading, and searching for more, books that I would enjoy. But prior to that, I had a lackluster kind of, approach to books. I did it for school, but it wasn't something that I did for enjoyment. Um, and then you talk about, where we are today, versus where we were. We've made great strides, but we need more books featuring people of color, written by people of color. Um, our kids need to see themselves in books, and they need to see themselves in a positive light. So there are like numerous. The beauty is that since the pandemic, the American Literacy Corporation, we started Reading 365, and in the month of February, we not started, but in the month of February, only books about or by African Americans could be shared on the platform. So every day you had two books by about African American. They were just phenomenal. I learned a lot of what was out there. And on February 6th, we had 6 hours of featuring African American authors. So we had about 25 authors, African American, from all across the country share their books. Powerful, um, but we need more. But what that showed me is that there's a lot of people like creating uh, just powerful material, just wonderful books celebrating us as a culture, as a people, and us. No one else can tell our story better than we can. So we're starting to tell our stories, and I think through a lot of these authors are self-published authors. I have authors who are friends who are published authors in a traditional way. The Jacqueline Woodson, the Charles R. Smith Jr., the Kadir Nelsons, and I mean just major authors and illustrators. But I asked one of them, I said, this was about 5 years ago. If had a choice of, you know, what do you think about self-published books? And they mentioned, they said, if you would have asked me this 5, 10 years ago, so this was 5 years ago, so we're talking 10 to 15 years ago, they said, I would have said being published the traditional way, Random House, Simon and Schuster, Scholastic, all the major publishing companies was the way to go. But today, with social media the way that it is, people are able to get their product out in a very, thoughtful and good way. So where they're able to now sell their product, get it to market, and promote it in ways that, and with tools that they typically did not have 10, 15 years ago. So it's just great seeing all the wonderful material out there and like almost every day. And the beauty is that even though it's not Black History Month anymore, we are still getting Black authors on the platform sharing their books like throughout the year. So it's starting to become Black History 365 close to it. And that's just really encouraging to see all this wonderful material out there, but we need more.
Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, Danielle, for you, did you see yourself reflected in the books you read as a kid?
So I did. My experience was a little different. I think my parents were very intentional um, in ingraining into me that representation matters, right? So I learned that at an early age. So I think through books where the characters looked like me were present in my home growing up. I had a scholastic book set that is still at my parents' home relative to Black inventors. I think that's why I'm so passionate about sharing. Did you know? So I had books about Garrett Morgan, Elijah McCoy, Phyllis Wheatley was in the set. So it's a beautiful set, and I don't know if it's still published today, but I cherish that forever because it was very informative for me. Um, Another, I guess, opportunity where I was exposed to Black authors was through it's a mother's organization, really, for mothers and their children. It's called Jack and Jill of America. And there used to be a chapter here in the greater Harrisburg area. And I was a member from age 2 until 18 when I graduated out upon graduating from high school and before I entered college. And the local chapter was always very intentional about exposing the children to Black authors. So there were often times where they would bring Black authors here. We would have our own like read-ins, and we would engage with the authors, discuss the books that they had, upcoming opportunities, and sort of follow how they were operating as artists in the field. So I think the representation in my home and the exposure outside through Jack and Jill were both integral in my life in terms of representation.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for those great responses. So next, I'd like, the title of our program is a discussion on race in Central PA. I would like to hear, sorry, letting someone in. I'd like to hear more about your experiences in Central PA and what it's been like living here for you. Yeah, maybe Danielle, do you want to go first this time?
Okay, that's fine. Thanks. So let's see. I grew up in the city, but I attended private school from preschool through sixth grade, and then I attended public school for middle school and high school. And I would say growing up, I would like to think a pretty balanced life. Like, although I went to private school, I was still involved in activities like the local youth football and cheerleading league. It was the Harrisburg Packers. So I participated in that. I participated in like a girls club program. So I was involved in other activities where I got to meet some young girls at the time who are now really close friends. And it doesn't matter how long it's been since we've seen each other. When we do see each other, run into each other occasionally, it's like we never missed a beat. And I am very grateful for those experiences, because I really think that um, they allowed me to not only feel comfortable wherever I go, but just reminded me to always be myself. It doesn't matter where I am. So I'm grateful for that. Uh, Being in a private school, I guess for as long as I was, my class sizes were extremely small. So I knew that I was excelling, but I think it wasn't until maybe sixth grade where I saw that my classmates who didn't quite look like me were receiving accolades that I knew that I had earned. Um, and so I think I kind of had a conversation with my parents about it, uh, and figuring out a way of how I could address it as a student, right? And so I spoke with my teachers, I spoke with the school administrators. And in the end, when it came to my sixth grade graduation ceremony, I received the awards that I had rightfully earned. So I think, I guess, while it probably wasn't as blaring in my face, I know that racism was present at some point, but I don't think it was as blaring, maybe, as it is now. When I transitioned to public school, I think it was more of a diverse atmosphere, and that was really my interest, in diversifying my class a little bit more. Um, and I think that prepared me. I attended college in Atlanta. So by the time I got to Atlanta, coming from central Pennsylvania, it was a totally different world. Of course, I was ignorant to Southern hospitality. So race there was a little different. I entered as if I was the northern girl who, like, why are you speaking to me? I don't know you. But in the end, by the time I graduated, I became that, hi, how's it going? I became that bubbly ambassador for my college. So I do think racism was present again, but it wasn't as blaring, maybe as it is now for students in school.
So with me growing up in Mississippi, joined the military, traveled around, ended up stationed at Carlisle Barracks, right there in Carlisle. Spent 3 years there, got out, and at the moment when I was getting out, I wanted to make a little extra money. I hadn't gotten out of the military yet, but I knew I wanted to start my own business. So as a way to do that, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to open up a music store selling CDs, records, and those kinds of things. You don't remember that, Samantha, but it used to exist. Okay, I'm just saying.
Yes, I do.
So I went to the mall, the local mall, and I asked the music store. I'm not sure if he was the manager, but whoever was in charge there at the time. I said, could I, apply for a job for, to work here? And he said, do you have cash register experience? Well, no, I've been in the military forever, for a few years, and that was my first kind of job moving around. I've not had a job working in retail. He said, "Well, no, we're looking for somebody with cash register experience." Really, cash register experience? I'll tell you that. So I ended up, opening my own music store, and I, had it successful business for 9 years. But it was that moment that I'm like, you can't teach me how to work a cash register. So I've had instances where some of my white friends felt comfortable enough calling me a boy, kind of things. I had to correct them. That kind of title is unacceptable. And we dealt with that in the South and for years. So I've had those kind of situations. But I think the key when faced with those kind of situations, we have to correct them. Otherwise, they continue. And I actually corrected someone. It must have been about 3-4 months ago. She called Kamala her girl, and I had to explain to her. I got some pushback when I first mentioned it to her. She's like, "I've been doing this, calling my Black girlfriends, friend girls, whatever, girl for years." Well, you shouldn't have been. And when I pointed to, resources as to why she shouldn't, eventually she came around and she was like, "Thank you." But those kinds of situations, we just have to correct. I don't think people, mean harm, but they just didn't know. So and I think the key is that with me living in Carlisle, moving to Harrisburg, being involved in the community, what I will say is that I've met some really, really good people, all colors, all ethnicities. So I think, and in that, of course, the message that people are people are people, So yes, I've, experienced, racism, discrimination, but I also have been the beneficiary of goodwill people from all over.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, but thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I know it's not easy to talk about, so I really appreciate that. Um, the last thing I have in my notes is just, there are probably people here now thinking, well, what can I do? What difference can I make? And I was just wondering if either of you have any insight on that, on how we can all work towards a more anti-racist society. Whoever wants to go first.
So I think that, especially in light of what has happened, again, I'll just continue to build on what I was saying. In meeting a lot of people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and working alongside them, education is the key. Um, and so, we all need to educate ourselves. I need to learn more. We were talking before the recording started, about what's happening in the Asian community. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So as we see injustices happening, we need to speak up, speak out, and stand together. And it's like the light in a dark room. If there's one flashlight shining in one corner, that's not enough. We need many, many flashlights shining so that it lights up the whole room, so there are no dark spots. So us working together is the key.
I would agree. I think getting engaged with if you are a city resident, getting involved with your local government. You can also access your state elected officials as well. And I think that provides an opportunity to really have a pulse and a sense of what's going on around you, relative to really a little bit of everything, your development that's coming into your area, housing opportunities, for the teenagers, if there are any on the line. We do have youth council. It's a little funked right now due to COVID, but that provides an opportunity for younger students to get involved within local government. I would say volunteer if there's a local community organization that your values align with their mission and impact that they have in your local community. Take some time to do that, of course, safely. If your schedule and the opportunities are available, please take advantage of those. But I would have to agree with Mr. Stokes. I think that it begins with education, and there are always opportunities for improvement, self improvement, family improvement, community improvement. But I think he's right. It begins with education, and we have to be mindful of our biases and work daily to. While we may not have superpowers to alleviate them all, I think that we can improve upon them.
Thank you both. Very insightful. I appreciate that. Really, before we open it up to our audience, is there anything that either of you would like to add or talk about?
No, I will echo what Danielle said. If volunteer, get involved, and find an organization that is doing the work that you're interested in, and find what makes you tick, where's your passion, and volunteering allows you to do that, to move around, if you will. And if that doesn't work for you, try something else. But it gives you a wonderful opportunity to try out some things and figure out what your interests are, especially with young people.
Yeah, definitely. All right. All right. Well, now we have some time for all of you. If you would like to share it all, or if you have a topic you'd like to discuss, or questions, anything like that. It's open forum. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I noticed that both of our friends have been in the South and I have not. Could you talk about the difference between the treatment of Blacks in the North and the South and enlighten us about that, about both of you? That's the question. Either Floyd or Danielle, are you treated better in the North than in the South, or worse, or doesn't it make a difference?
Okay, well, I guess I can speak to my experience. I spent my college years in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a proud graduate of Spelman College, a all-women liberal arts college in Atlanta. And I can say that, so I was there from 2005 to 2009. I tried to stay, but I graduated at the height of the recession, if you remember, and I had to come home. So I loved my experience in Atlanta. I don't know if I would want to live there again, but I will say that I saw um, many Black people thriving in a different sense than my Northern experience here. I would say with the larger industries, you have many headquarters in the greater Atlanta metro area. So I think within the business community, I saw Black people just excelling. Really, there's the World of Coke, JP Morgan. There's so many opportunities there. In terms of housing equity, I think that um, in some areas outside of Atlanta, I would say like maybe 20 minutes outside of the city, homes are extremely affordable. And of course, you have more land and opportunity in those respects in the suburban areas. I will say one thing that was on the brink of occurring my senior year. The area where Spelman College is located, it's in the west end of Atlanta. It is uh, not the best area, but what I saw or began to see rather, the area being gentrified. So there are three schools that are literally across the street and out a back gate from each other. So there's Spelman College, Morehouse College, which is an all males liberal arts college across the parking lot. And then out of our back gates meets Clark Atlanta University, which is a co-ed institution. We all share a library. So anyway, there was a housing project that was at the end of the promenade where we would go to use the library. And what happened was all of those residents that were living in the area, they were moved out to Decatur, Georgia. And this was really, imagine being uprooted from your home, a space that in location, proximity, everything that you've known your entire life, being uprooted to a whole new area. So I often wonder, and sometimes my friends and I talk about it, I just wonder what happened to those people, because this was all that they knew. And they were never a threat. I never had a sense of fear in the community space. It was always very much encouraging to walk to the library and someone, how are your classes going? How are you doing today? So I think it was always just always encouragement. But I did wonder what happened when I go back now to visit. Um, I see the changes in the area in terms of housing, even the houses around. There is a public library that's not too far from my campus as well. And those houses in that area, oh my goodness, the cost of living is astronomical now. So it's just really interesting how that housing equity has changed. But I will say that Black people continue to thrive, I think, in our larger metropolitan cities.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
I am part of a mixed family and a lot of relatives living in Atlanta, Black relatives who absolutely love it there and prosper there. I would never live there myself. I don't care for it. I think though, in this day and age, particularly, the best thing that we can do, or the thing we have to do, is speak up. I think it's no longer enough to be against racism, but we have to be actively vocal about it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of really good books out now. How to be an anti-racist, mediocre. There's just a lot of good books that we can educate ourselves better about it. How to behave, how to, I think white people have for so long been able to, or have shifted the burden of racism onto Black people. So even in our efforts to somehow come to terms with racism, it has almost been an expectation of those people who are most negatively affected by racism to somehow make it more comfortable for us to deal with it. And I think the books that are coming out with now are at least helping on that mission. They're helping white people to understand better how to discuss the topic, how to relate to people, and how to take some responsibility for white supremacy, and to, I guess, just take responsibility for some of it, and how to be responsible and start helping to make a change, but be responsible for that change and not always expect other people to bear the burden of that. And I just think that's what we have to do now. And whether it's an issue because of race, because sexism, because of any of the many issues out there, there's such an intersectionality about so many things that we have to speak up and support people who are being discriminated against in any fashion, that we just have to stand up and help them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for sharing, Joe. We appreciate that. Do you have anything to follow that up with, Floyd or Danielle?
Yeah, so, with growing up in the South, and interacting with whites, what I've seen, Mike, and the audience here, is that they'll speak to you, whites, but they won't invite you to their home. They still believe that, separate is the right way to go. So, yeah, the Southern hospitality is real. They'll speak to you, be cordial, or what have you, but that's as far as it goes. You will be persecuted. The lynching that happened, those were, people who would speak to you, but the hate is still there. And so I think that the difference, Mike, is that, here in the North, it's more subtle. In the South, is more overt. And so, you can move about in, white communities to a certain extent, but there are ones who are really adamant and show their hate, but many of them, that have these biases, they're more subtle about it. So you have to look a little closer. You have this microaggression kinds of stuff. You have these, other types of things that are happening, but you really can't put a finger on it kind of situation.
Thank you.
It's like being in a room, many times, depending on where I'm serving, I might be in a room full of whites. And, one or two might come up to me or say something, but it's like Ralph Ellison's, his book, The Invisible Man. That's where I am.
Thank you for sharing that. We still have plenty of time. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Last night I participated in a session about young people being put into prisons. And that got, of course, we got into the racial issue because of that. Because when you take a look at young people who are wrongly incarcerated, and young people being incarcerated is wrong to begin with, especially when we look at people who are many times under the age of 16, sometimes as young as 10, 11, or 12. And if you take a look at them, who you are going to generally find are people of color or extremely, extremely poor people, but mostly you're looking at people of color. We're into the issue of race right there again, and it's race and education again. So there's just so many issues that come around this that that how is this not the most important thing to deal with right now in our world?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Sure, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, my other question, and I'm searching for it, and if Floyd or Danielle or anybody can answer it. In most of the groups that I am in, they're interfaith groups, which is great, and I recommend that to everybody. But what I found is that in almost every case, I'm preaching to the choir. The people in the interfaith groups are people that are already mostly committed to working together. And my question is, I have struggled to find out how to reach the bigots of this world. How can we educate people who are not people that we deal with every day, and how do we get to them even to have discussions or have talk to them or have them read the books? That's the problem I have. We're too much, I think we're talking to the choir, and yet I'm struggling to find out how I can even have a discussion with somebody who doesn't understand, to explain how, how the world is. So if anybody has an answer, I've been looking for it a long time.
Have you heard of Braver Angels?
No, what kind of a group is that?
I've just started getting involved with them, and I kind of thought they were going to be the answer. I'm not 100% sure, but Braver Angels it's really a political tool, but it brings Republicans and Democrats together with the idea that if we learn to talk to each other, we can go past our differences. So it's very, very conservative and very liberal people coming together to find a way to talk to each other. And so it is people on most times on opposing sides, learning to be able to talk to each other so that they can find that their differences are most often less than what they share in common.
Okay, that's a good.
So I've seen some groups do very well with it. Okay, it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it is why I started getting involved with it, hoping it would lead to lines of conversation. So if you go online and you look for American Braver Angels,
okay,
they do some. You can find online discussion groups. They do some training. There is a group in our area.
Oh,
and I think it's leading to some of that.
Good. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Wrote it down. I've got more.
Actually, Joyce Davis did a session of it one day as part of one of her other groups that I was involved with. That's how I heard of it. So, okay.
I asked Joyce too. That's a good.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, are you're on social media? You're on Facebook, right?
Right. But I don't have too many people, even Facebook. The problem is with Facebook, again, the people on Facebook are the people that I agreed to be on. So about 9 out of 10 people that give me Facebook messages every day are people like me. I very rarely get a message from a hateful person. Every once in a while I do, but not a lot. And also remember, I'm not talking to them directly. So that I suspect that some of the people on Facebook that are negative are going to always be negative. Whatever anybody else says, they're going to say, boy, I'm right. Those liberals are really crazy, and they proved it. So I'm not sure that isn't too helpful for me about how to reach people. Let me ask you this, Floyd, when you do your reading thing and you have 365 and some of those things, what would you say about the views of the people who read? Are they mostly people who understand the racism and are willing to help? Do you ever get people that read who don't understand it, and that's sort of the way to educate that? Do you get people like that or not?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so if you're looking for bigots, I'm going to send you some of my friends on Facebook, but you're right. Don't engage them, okay, on Facebook. Don't engage them on social media. What I tend to do is to send them a private message, because I think, it's kind of like criticize in private, praise in public. But
Okay.
if you engage them in public, then they're probably going to blow up, right? But
Right.
they'll be a little more sensible rather, when approaching them privately.
Privately.
You asked a really good question. About 3 months ago, there was a lady who, we prepped before reading and having a discussion, and I forget the exact conversation, but she was basically asking me, kind of like, what's your stance on political kind of information? And I told her, I said, we don't discriminate, so if this is what I told her: if you're a Trump supporter,
Fine.
we won't promote that here on this platform. If you anti-gay, LGBT, we won't promote that on this platform. If you are not accepting of other ethnicities, we won't promote that. And she said, she said something smart like, kind of like Holy Floyd, right? I said, no, I'm not. I have so many flaws. It's like incredible. However, I did create this platform, and so I will decide what we promote, and those things we won't promote. If you want to promote those, you go create Reading 365 on your platform, and you promote those issues that are important to you. These are important to me, so I won't have anybody disrespecting my platform.
Great.
Fair enough. Can I also make another suggestion to Mike? Mike, you might be interested in a book, and an interesting issue is written by Ben Sass, who is a Republican, but the book is called Them: Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal.
Okay.
And though it's written by a Republican, he has some really interesting, he did a lot of research, and he's got a lot of interesting ideas about why we are so far apart in our society right now.
Good. Thanks for that recommendation. Good.
Great, thank you. I saw a couple other microphones go off. Yeah, Deborah, please.
I think our educational system has done a poor job in the history of African Americans in this country. We've only learned little bits here and little bits there. And so what do children take home? They take little bits. And I think that has been a detriment to our African American families. And I also feel that things are changing. I mean, look how we're all having this conversation right now. And I think my children's generation is definitely changing. And I think we're seeing more interracial families than we've ever seen before being accepted. So I think it's starting. Things are starting in a positive way. I really do. And I think this whole pandemic brought out a lot about, the pandemic and what happened this summer. And I think people are learning from that. I know I had read about a year or 2 years ago that there was a young man, white guy who was a supremacist, a big time. I think his father was one of the heads, and he was active in it. And then he finally got to meet a family. I think it was a Jewish family, but I'm not quite sure. I don't remember exactly. And befriended this family and just, turned around totally. I'm sorry, it was an African-American family he became very good friends with, and just turned his whole viewpoint about being a supremacist. So, and that's this younger generation. And I think that is starting to change. You're always going to unfortunately, have people who just don't read and don't know any better. And we all know it's important to read about history. And it changes a lot of people's viewpoints when they know about the real history. And that to me is very important. I think our schools need to step up on that and share that. And also families need to share that. African-American families need to share that. Caucasian families need to share that. Our holiday of Passover starts this coming weekend. And we have a book, it's called the Haggadah. And it's to tell, and we tell the story of our slavery. Now, our slavery, I guess you would say it's different. We were slaves. We were turned as slaves because people didn't appreciate us, and we became slaves. And it was a very, very difficult time. Yes, it's a biblical story, but we read it with our children every single year. We read the same exact story of our history, and we talk about it, and we talk about how we can improve it. And we invite people into homes. In fact, they even tell you to invite someone into your Seder, into your the meal that we have this discussion. It's very powerful. And I really feel there should be a book for African Americans that they read every single year. It's taught in school as well and shared with all students as well. It really helps to learn their history and everyone's history and the African American history, because it is different.
I agree with Miss Reed, Deborah, my friend.
Yes. And we are
she's,
friends.
Yes, and she's invited me to her ceremonies, and I've learned a lot. And I agree. I mean, if you read a book, say, especially from, say, Texas, it's slanted towards, just false information of history and the way it happened, and it's prevalent. It's all over. I picked up a history book 3 years ago from my daughter's school here, and I read something and it blew me away. I'm like, wait a minute. So it gave most recently, I read in a book where they gave the definition of slavery. They gave the definition of slavery as, working for free. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Like, kids are learning this. So it's no wonder, especially when you look at, so if you think about a white child and they're learning that, oh, slavery wasn't that bad. They just worked for free. Like, so you mean tell me it was like me volunteering for the library?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same? I mean, the misleading information is just mind-boggling that's been put out.
Right.
And, some books, they'll say that, whites did us a favor by snatching us from Africa and then bringing us here somehow, so it's a lot of false information out there that needs to be corrected in the school. It's been taught in schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's alternative curriculums that they wanted to implement.
Yeah.
I have a question for the group. Has anyone read The 100 Voices? It's of 100 African Americans from the old 8th Ward of Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Not read it. No.
Yes,
Okay.
I have the book.
You have read it?
I have the book, yes, from the 8th
And have you
Ward.
gotten through it yet?
It was telling about where different people lived and what schools they went to, colleges they went to. And I don't remember every detail.
It also talked about their impact within the 8th Ward. It talked about some of their political affiliations, if they had any, but it really emphasized the one paragraph. It was written in first person. It emphasized their, I guess I would say, social impact within the 8th Ward and the surrounding wards.
Right, when you talked about your grandfather's hotel, I wondered, like, maybe is he mentioned in there? Um,
So so if you're familiar with the Commonwealth Monument,
Yes, yeah.
his name is listed in the 100 Voices. So yeah.
That's cool. I like biographies, and I am not ashamed to say I will browse the children's section of the library. I got a great book. It was on Maggie L. Walker, who she grew up in Richmond, but she was, first female to charter a bank and be president of a bank, and it was just a terrific story. I wondered if there's other biographies that people have read that they would recommend.
What's that?
In terms of children's books, or
No, in terms of, African-American leaders. I know you mentioned you have the series on the inventors. I think I've seen like a book that had just little snippets of it, but not a book on each.
Book of many.
Debbie, you have that book that you gave me?
Right, I do. I have it downstairs. Do you want me to go get it? It's,
No, I'll have Madison get it from upstairs and she'll bring it to me. Go ahead and do that. Madison is listening. She'll bring it. But that would be one, Annie, that.
What was the other one? The Orchard? Remember a few years back? Well, probably about.
The Purple Orchard. It was a color.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was a local one too.
It was about a doctor, an African-American doctor.
Right.
And
it's pretty popular.
Have you read the Michelle Obama one?
That was so good.
Oh yeah.
Annie.
And listening to her was excellent.
I just finished Barack Obama's the stories from my father, which was really neat. Yeah.
I have that. Do you know that he is, what night is it? I just signed up to participate in, Barnes and Nobles has a, I think it's pre-recorded, but it's going to be Obama and the woman who wrote Cast.
Yeah, that's who I'm looking for.
Right. They're going to be, it's pre-recorded, but you can sign up to do the Zoom with it at Barnes and Nobles. And that is coming up. I just signed up for it last night. It's coming up on March 29th at Barnes and Nobles. It's pre-recorded, but it's going to be Obama and her. But they're really going to be looking at his book.
Right. And Floyd, can you hold that up a little higher? I want to see if I've already seen one like that. I might have had that one home with my kids.
So Debbie dropped this off to me about a month ago or so, and we've been going through it, but because I know a little bit more, we can talk about it. So we'll read a couple of pages out of this, but we'll discuss even more about the book here.
And it has a timeline on it. It has a timeline of African-American history in our country, which would be a wonderful timeline to hang in classrooms. And then teachers can be talking about African-American history throughout the year and not just during 1 month. It can be incorporated throughout the history. There's another good book called The Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson. Right. And that's the story about the journey from the Great Migration from the South to the North. And that's an excellent book, excellent book to read.
Yeah, I have read.
Really,
go on.
Yeah, that's just it's just a good one to read.
2 comments on books that you've mentioned before. Once you've read that Isabel Wilkerson book, you want to pick up her next book, which is incredible. It's called Cast.
Right.
C-A-S-T-E. And that is an unbelievable book. What she does is she studied the situation with Blacks in the United States, the situation with Jews in the Holocaust, and the situation with the Shun class in India. And that's what the book is about, to compare those 3 groups of people discriminated against and their histories. One of the stunning things she concludes from this study is that it was worse here in the slavery movement than either the Holocaust. Well, I almost fell off my chair to conclude that the treatment of everyday Blacks in slavery was, and then I thought, yeah, that's probably true, that if you were a Black in the South, you were discriminated against and hung from trees no matter who you were and mistreated.
Mhm.
If you were a Jew in Germany, you might have been and you might not have been. And the same thing, if you were grown up in India, the difference is that you knew you couldn't get out of it. So you were in this caste and you were sort of together. I thought of that when Floyd talked about his experience with an all-Black community. If you're at that lower level in India, you can't talk to anybody in the higher level or work with them. So that's a wonderful book. The other thing I was telling you is that book about Tales from My Father that Obama wrote. He wrote that book when he graduated from law school, before he ever started to be a legislator or a famous person. That is a very important book to read, because it was a book written by a Black fellow in a white life, okay? His mother disappeared and was all over the world. So he was raised in Hawaii by a white grandmother. And he lived his life until he was about 20. He never saw another Black person. And when he started law school, he would struggle to find out what it was to be a Black person, because the only thing Black about him until he was that age was the color of his skin. And it was just a learning experience for Obama, which he describes in the book as he got older, went to law school and stuff like that. So it's just an interesting book, the question of, what difference does it make, the color of your skin? And, we are so racist in the United States that all you have to do to be discriminated against is to have Black skin. It doesn't make any difference, what your background is or your history. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, it's amazing.
almost sickening to realize that you can walk out and two people, one Black and one white, exactly the same, and their experiences are so much different, which is, the definition of racism. So that's a real good book, that early Obama book, to sort of get an idea of who he was.
But do you remember how happy we were as a country when Obama won the election and became the first African-American president?
Yes.
There was such a celebration. It was so beautiful. And politics got involved. And it was just, it's sad because politics have such an influence. It's
And
sad.
the country went crazy after that. They went insane because a Black man had been elected.
Right. They couldn't handle it.
No.
But we cheered in the streets. It was wonderful.
So Annie, a friend lady of mine read this Cicely Tyson book recently, and she said it just fantastic book. Couldn't put it down.
That's great. I'm in the comments. Someone just mentioned Sister Outsider, and another one I'm trying to screenshot. Oh, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Yep, I know about that.
Yeah,
one.
that's great.
Yep.
And children's book, The Undefeated, which is one I read on 365.
Yes.
And it's just beautifully illustrated. And it not only talks about all the traditional heroes of the African-American world, but it also is up to date with some too. And it's just beautifully illustrated.
I have a few thoughts. If I have a book or two recommendations, and then I wanted to circle back to some of the things Miss Deborah mentioned. Okay, so my book recommendation is called One Drop: Shifting the Lens on Race. It's by Dr. Yaba Blay. In going back to what Miss Deborah was saying about education and our educational system and the limited access there is to Black history, I'm a firm believer that education starts at home. So if we all have friends, and I think we have too much access now to the internet to find books to curate in our libraries about Black history. So I just wanted to note that. The other thought is, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I wondered if anyone has ever heard or if you in fact use the term colorblind. I know I've heard it a lot in the working world, and I'm like, but if you're colorblind, you don't see me. You
Right.
don't see
Right.
me as a Black
Right.
person. You don't see me as a Black woman in today's society. And I wanted to offer a very powerful TED Talk. It's called Colorblind or Color Brave, and it was delivered by Melody Hobson. Another resource I wanted to mention, I learned about this TED Talk from the Diversity and Inclusion Professionals of Central Pennsylvania. It's a group of D&I practitioners from, I would say, large corporations within the area to universities that are present. They meet once a month, bi-monthly. It's like the fourth Friday bi-monthly. It's wonderful. Presentations are shared. I think it would be really helpful to maybe sit in or maybe join if you have an interest, or just look it up. But I think it's really helpful. And I think the presentations shared are helpful in recognizing our biases and then working towards figuring out what we can do in terms of accessibility for those who are not able-bodied. Access to equity within the workplace for women, all women, women of color, and just women in general. So I think there have been some wonderful presentations there. So I just wanted to mention those things and those resources, and hopefully you all can explore those further.
And education does begin at home. You're right. And it has to be taught there. You're 100%.
Yes.
That's great. While we're giving commercials for good programs, I want to talk about one where Danielle was a star. I'm on the board of the Martin Luther King Leadership Development Institute, and we're a program that we're in our 12th year, and each year we have a class of what we call scholars that learn about how to be a leader. It's a wonderful program, and Danielle is one of our scholars and was involved in the program. And many of those people, some are leaders, but some are just people who want to learn about leadership. And that's a good place. I'm now recruiting for the next class, which starts in May. And that's if you know somebody, no matter what age, that just is interested in learning about leadership and how to become a leader, you want to talk to Danielle or me about how to get involved in that. That's another resource in our community.
Absolutely. I would echo Mr. Sand's sentiments there. I found the Martin Luther King Leadership Development Institute very helpful. I'm a proud alumna of the class of 2014, and it was a varied mix of individuals. Some had retired from careers, but they still had an interest in, I guess, continuing to hone their leadership skills at that point. But I found the program to be very helpful for me in honing both my short-term and long-term goals, and really sort of figuring out how I could capitalize on my strengths to make a greater impact within my community.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing and providing all your book recommendations. We still have about 15 minutes. Does anybody else want to? Yeah, Maddie, please.
I have some book recommendations. I am an 11th grader at PA Cyber Charter School. And so this year they had not one, but two books on the list that we could choose for English that highlighted African Americans. And so this is one of the books that I picked. It's A Lesson in Design by Ernest Gaines. And it's truly an incredible book. I definitely recommend it.
Definitely.
Yes. The other one on the list, I don't have it with me, but it was Black Boy. I read it ninth grade year actually at SciTech High School. And so that also is a great book to read as well to get educated. And then I also have this book, Misty Copeland, and it talks about her life growing up in a very poverty-stricken town. And as you know, she's the first African-American at the prima ballerina American Ballet Theater. And so this book taught me that there is no excuses in life. Like, she achieved this, and she started dancing at the YMCA, I believe. And so now she's dancing with ABT. So it's a great book to read. And then lastly, this has a bunch of notes. I've read it so many times, but it's The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And so
Oh, yeah.
don't mind my
Yeah.
notes, but this is the book. And so her story is incredible. You know, she, her cells were taken from her, and her family was never even knew about it. And it was just a horrible situation. And so they talked about it in this book, and we were actually able to meet the family, I think a couple years back. But
Wow.
yeah, it was a really great experience. So those are my book recommendations.
Hey, Maddie, you forgot one. The Fly, the one, the young lady from Africa, the ballerina. You have that
Oh
one?
yes, let me get that really quick.
Because
But
she did a
Taking
book.
Flight by Taking Flight by Michaela de Prince. Yes, it's let me see if I can find it. But yes, that is another great book to read.
Wow.
Her story is incredible as well. She's from Sierra Leone, and so she was adopted with her sister, brought back to the US. She wanted to dance. There was a newspaper flying in the wind. She caught it. There was a ballerina. She was like, I want to do this. I want to dance. And so she was signed up for classes. She's now a prima ballerina. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a phenomenal story to read.
The other thing you can do to get educated is go to museums. I have something unbelievable to tell you. One of the best museums in the country is right here in Harrisburg. Who knew that if you go to a good museum to learn about slavery, especially, you go to the museum here, right up on the hill, and that's a wonderful place. It's a very inexpensive, and it's right here. And if you want to go to the best museum in the whole country to learn about African-American history, you go to the big one in Washington. It's new, and it's still fairly hard to get tickets, but man, you go to that library and you can learn an awful lot by walking up those 4 floors. You have to have a long day doing that. And then when you come out, you cry. It's that kind of museum. You say, oh, I didn't know how bad things were. This is really, you know. Or if you really want to cry all day, I recommend that you go to 3 museums in Washington. You go to that museum, the African American Museum, and then you cry. And then you walk down the street to the Holocaust Museum. You go to that museum all day, and then you cry. And then you think you've cried all you can learn about mistreating people, and you walk down the street to the New India Museum, and you learn now know that the story, that's the worst story. You're talking about history books. You read what we're teaching kids about how us white Europeans dealt with the Indians who owned this land. That's the worst story I ever heard. And we're lied to every book I ever saw about what happened when the Europeans kicked all those, people who owned the land off it. That's a story I'd love to be told and our kids to be told. And they're not yet. I haven't seen one school book that told the truth about, how this country really got started. That's another topic for the library. They'll have to have a whole one on how we tell people stories in books. That's another whole exercise.
We actually did have a program called The Importance of Narrative Correction with Christy Coleman. I believe it's on our YouTube page. I'll see if I can link it. It was really, really a wonderful discussion, talking specifically about that and how we teach stories and the things that we're teaching our children, and how we can go about changing that. Let me see if I can find that for you really quickly, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing and all of your recommendations. This has been fantastic.
I was so glad Maddie suggested A Lesson Before Dying, because that is a book that I think everybody in this country should read at some time. It should be required reading.
What's the name of it, Joe?
A Lesson Before Dying.
Okay, thank
by
you.
Gaines. Yeah, it should be.
Thank you.
Well, with the last few minutes we have, Floyd, Danielle, is there anything else you would like to add tonight?
No, thank you. I would just like to thank the library system for the invitation to participate tonight. Thank you all for attending, and I really enjoyed our dialogue. If you would like to keep in touch with me, I will share my email address in the chat, but thank you again for the invitation, and it's been a great dialogue.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. It was fantastic having you and so nice to meet you.
Indeed.
Yeah, I really appreciate everything you had to offer.
I echo Danielle's sentiments, and I would say thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure being here with you all. And I probably was reading at Danielle's Jack and Jill program at some point when she was growing up. So kudos. Thank you so much for having me.
Super reader.
All right. Well, yeah, if you want to grab any email addresses out of the chat, stay on another few seconds here, but thank you all so much for, oh yes, please.
Do you mind if I make a little suggestion, if you don't mind, being that you work at the library, maybe you could make a display of some of these wonderful books and make a title that Black History Month isn't just in February. And people could start reading, like, you know, the one I mentioned, and the Lessons Before Dying, and because it really isn't just one month. It's good that it's recognized, but, you know, we need to know more. People need to know more.
Yeah, I definitely try to incorporate diversity into my displays, and, you know, what you have facing out for the kids. That's what they grab first, you know, so I'm really trying to put good stuff right in their hands. But yeah, so thank you, Deborah, for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so you're for the children's library, or you're the whole library?
I am a youth services manager, so I do children's stuff predominantly. Yep.
I see. Okay. Sounds good. I'm an author, so I know it's important. A children's author, along with Floyd, my mentor. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, so much. This has been a really wonderful evening. I hope you all take care and keep checking out what we're offering. We have lots of virtual stuff going on. So yeah, keep up with our compass that comes out every couple of months. And we hope to see you around.
I'll mention Klein Library is going to do, we don't have our book sales going on because, you know, COVID. But on April 17th, we're going to do a pop-up sale. It's just going to be hardback and trade